Rightio. Got a few things to talk about here. And I'm just going to basically run them off the top of my head. Oh, got a little phone buzz there, but we can ignore that straight away. Right. Topic numero uno. I already hate the fact that I said numero uno, so we'll just say number one. Topic number one. Consciousness as a spectrum. I think basically this is God, I feel like such a dick just even talking about consciousness in general, but I think it's pretty clear that like most things, it exists on a spectrum, and you can make pretty clear distinctions between different species. So I'd like to think, so some people like to assume that something's either conscious or not conscious. And I'm sure there is a cut-off point somewhere. Probably isn't where I don't think anyone agrees on where that is, though. And I think certainly, and this is probably, quite a good reason for people to become vegetarian and vegan and all that, is that things like cows and other animals, chickens, what have you, they're probably all conscious to quite a high degree relative to what we might have thought it was before, or hoped at least. Whether, if I were to try and assign attributes that would, so you could quantify consciousness to any true degree, then the ability to, I think, even just the ability to avoid pain is probably on some level, quite a serious indicator of being conscious. But when people discuss consciousness, most of the time they're talking about something's ability to reason and a sort of understanding of self-awareness. So there you're going to have, if you consider someone with brain damage, I think it might not be nice to say, but I think it's probably true that someone with severe brain damage would be considered less conscious than a fully functioning human. Again, not a nice thing to say. But I'd like to know a way that could be disproved, really. Obviously it's hard to, this is the real, I think this probably is what people are talking about when they say the hard problem of consciousness. It's hard to ever truly assess whether something else is conscious in the way that you understand it. I don't think there really is a way you could ever, okay, this is what, so we'll go into AI later. But one of the true concerns that does make sense about AI is that we could create something that is seemingly intelligent, almost definitely will be more intelligent than us immediately. But the fear is that it isn't conscious in the same way that we are. And the problem arises when you try to think of a way to assess whether it is or not. And we don't really have any techniques that are objective. At the moment, the only way we can assess whether anything is conscious is whether, to what degree it behaves like us. So I have no way of proving that even my parents or anyone in the entire world is conscious in the same way that I am, aside from the fact that they behave similar to the way I do, and they can express what it's like to be them to a similar degree that I can express what it's like to be me. And therefore I must assume that they are, but they could just as well be the AI we will eventually create. And you can imagine a robot that can convince every human to the same degree, but is just plucking, let's say it has a list of every possible response to every possible input we give it. So if we were to ask it, are you conscious? And it would probably give the similar response to humans, like, well, I think I'm conscious. I feel as though I am. But whether it's actually constructing that sentence, or whether it's just plucking it from a dense library, I think is quite a serious probably should stop saying and but it's quite a serious distinction. Again, I've used that word, but it's a good word, so I'll stick with it. So the only way to get around that then would be to program it so that it is that there needs to be some level of controlled randomness. So pardon me. So even if you had the largest library imaginable of possible responses, an infinite library, obviously not possible, but for all intents and purposes it is, and every possible response is stored to every possible input, but the being just plucks, not necessarily at random, but picks the most appropriate response to whatever the input is, then it would seem there would be no distinction between the answer that would give and what a conscious human would give. But the methodology is what's different, and that will limit creativity. So what we need is some kind of algorithm that is able to narrow down from a library different options, but then to take separate aspects from many different things and construct them into an entirely new and original sentence. Maybe I'm just assuming this is what humans do. It feels like that might be what we're doing. But yeah, so we would have a way to know if that's what the things do. Again, we'd have to assume that's what humans are doing if we're trying to replicate human consciousness. But we certainly would have a way of knowing whether that's what the robot's doing, because we would have programmed it to do that. So yeah, that's that. And then back to the actual spectrum, the consciousness spectrum aspect. You have to ask yourself if consciousness is a spectrum, and we can create consciousness to a human degree. What's to stop us from creating something that's more conscious than we are? I think that seems entirely plausible. Well, let's just say we managed to create a replica of a human in every aspect, except for the fact that it's mechanical rather than biological. But in every sense of the word, it is a clone, with that one exception. Of course, we already know that humans are insufficient computers. Computers, literally, I mean computing numbers. So if you would assume that the first AI would be superior at maths, because we wouldn't exactly dumb it down, would we? So would that one, and this is obviously going to be the matter for lots of different things, it's better at chess and all sorts of things like that. But what you have to question is whether you could give it access to more input than humans have access to. So, for example, birds can see ultraviolet light. I think that's right. Some insects might be able to, something like that. If we were to give them the ability to see a greater percentage of the spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, than us, would they then become more conscious on this scale? I don't really know. But the idea of having something more conscious than us probably seems like maybe a good thing, maybe a bad thing. Depends whether it would increase its propensity for happiness or suffering, or both. All right, what else? Okay, next I had AGI replacement. So this is, I don't think I'm the only person to hold this. It would be stupid to assume that I'm the only person to hold this view. In fact, I know that there are other people, I don't know their names, but Sam Harris has certainly referenced people who are of the opinion that when we create human level AGI, and he's also of the opinion that once we create human level AGI, we will have instantaneously, or simultaneously rather, created superhuman level AGI, like I was talking about with the calculator thing. Then we have to assume that these things are superhuman in all respects. Well, sorry, not superhuman. They're at least human in all respects. and I'd like to assume that they're also going to be at the upper echelons of human equivalents, so on par with a good human rather than just on par with the local dullard. So what we have to then question is whether the word that gets thrown around a lot that I dislike is, especially from the people who are actually working on this stuff, is control. And of course, up to the point when we actually achieve this milestone of creating, well, human level AGI, we do need to maintain control, because if it goes wrong, then it probably will do something bad. But once it can be said to unequivocally be human in that respect, then what right do we have to maintain control? Surely that's just, well, it's like a dictatorship, but you're then, yourself to be sub ultra human, so you have to at some point relinquish your power to the higher being. And even if it starts saying things which you disagree with, you might then say, oh well, we haven't created CPU. So the example they give is the fear that we create this human level AGI and its goals don't meet our own. But then surely we haven't created human level AGI. If it surpasses human level AGI and its goals differ from our own, then we should listen to it. We should adjust our goals to meet its. I mean, its goals should be, by all respects, superior. And I suppose the real answer would be to have it reason with us why it's aiming for those goals. So yeah, basically, I think as soon as we create AGI, we should be prepared to, accept our inferiority and basically, I don't know, give up on trying. We're up till this point, we've always believed we're kind of the main protagonist of the universe. But I think in this situation, we can't really consider ourselves to be. And then, obviously, at the moment we have our vision is to conquer the universe. Everyone likes the idea of planet hopping, rightly so. But in this scenario where we've created something better than ourselves, surely we have to give up that role to the better man, which isn't even a human or female, better woman. Sorry, there we go. Yeah, and another thing on the AGI replacement thing is that a lot of people seem to assume we were going to create them in our own image, which seems like a stupid limitation to me. Why would we put something that could be so much more? We already have robots that can fly. Why would we all of a sudden create a super intelligent robot that can't even fly, and with stupid little 2 legs, and this thing could travel between worlds and exist on planets that humans could never even imagine to live on. And we're thinking of having to colonize Mars. I mean, we could create a being capable of colonizing the universe itself, outer space. It could survive in those in a vacuum. It could survive at 10,000 degrees. Well, we wouldn't be able to make this being, but presumably the superhuman AGI could. There we go. Anyway, what else we got? Oh yeah, and this is so on the topic of the Fermi paradox. Some people have postulated that civilizations more advanced than our own came to the realization that they went inward. So instead of expanding throughout the universe, they decided to go inward. And that's actually quite an interesting matter when you think about it, because so actually this comes down to what is the real purpose of everything. And I think the only thing we can really justify at the moment is maximizing moral open quotation marks, close quotation marks, moral goodness. So we all, I think there isn't a single person on this planet who's sane, at least, that would consider suffering a good thing. I think everyone's pretty unanimous on the suffering being a bad thing. That's what makes it suffering. I think I've spoken about good and evil before. But anyway, good and evil are basically human constructs. But if we were to assume that we're striving for a perfectly good world, a perfectly good universe, so everything that occurs in the universe would be considered good or better, and we're just striving to avoid evil and suffering and pain at all costs, then surely a simulated reality is the way to go. And if we assume that the more good things the better, then the more simulated realities we create, the better. But obviously we'd be able to create more if we were to expand in the universe. So let's say you have a computer that can create 10 billion good lives. They wouldn't really be life as the way we know it at the moment, but yes, you have one computer and you can fit 10 billion computers on the planet. So for every one computer you have 10 billion lives, and every 10 billion, and then you have every planet you have 10 billion computers. So 10 billion times 10 billion lives on a planet. Well, then you can just create more if you're able to go to a different planet and put more computers on that planet. And eventually the goal still remains to get throughout the entire universe, creating as many good lives as possible, just for the sake of it. I mean, there's no real purpose to it, aside from the understanding that good things are good, and we want good. So there you go. That's that. So I don't think it quite answers the Fermi paradox, but maybe. So another thing is, if you consider the universe's development as a whole, you can kind of think of it as being like a video game. And yeah, so obviously you might imagine that the human race is probably the protagonist of this video game, but it's not. What I'm talking about is evolution itself is the protagonist, and kind of striving towards complete and utter understanding of the universe itself. And I think we've basically created goodness as a goal. So that's a kind of goal in itself, to have a basal level of good, rather than a basal level of neutral or suffering or whatever. And I think you could also just summarise the main quest of the game as being acquiring absolute knowledge and understanding of the universe. So obviously the two main kind of subquests in this big quest, it would be maths and physics, understanding the way the universe truly works. So yeah, that's that. And assuming at some point we acquire all there is to possibly know about the universe, not that that's necessarily possible with the understanding that the universe may be infinite. But anyway, if we could, and essentially complete the game, then maybe at that point, obviously we'd be an intelligence that we can't even comprehend at the moment. But maybe we'd realise that the goal really is the journey, and perhaps the only option we're left with is, much like people do with video games, is to restart the game. And the only way I can think of restarting the game would be to eliminate all life and let it start from scratch, or maybe give it a head start. Leave a single big bacterium around or something. I don't know. Anyway, all right, next thing. So yeah, the reasoning behind trying to make simulating realities being more efficient than real life is that we know energy is finite, or rather entropy certainly is going to continue to a point where we can't even have atoms anymore. So there basically is a finite timeline, or also, the expansion, contraction theory of the universe and all that. So there will be an end that we can't escape unless we find a way to escape out. I don't know. But we need to basically maximise efficiency of this basal level of goodness. And I think the most efficient way would be to simulate it. You could run it on computers. If you think about it like this, so I think the reason people answer, would you live in a simulated reality if given the choice? If your consciousness could be put into a computer and it could be run so that everything that happens is good, and you would have by definition you wouldn't understand that you were in a simulation, you'd think it was just real. People say no. I think the only reason they can justify saying no is the fear that they'd find out it was a simulation. Otherwise, why wouldn't you? It's like it's the life you're already living, but better. Yeah. I know. Oh, there's something I was going to say then, and I fucking lost it like a fucking moron. It'll come to me. Give it time. Yeah, so I think it would be by definition more efficient because our consciousness is dependent. Well, this is another assumption I'm making about consciousness, but I find it hard to deny that it's still a product of the neuronal firing in our brain. And we know that neurons have distance or other length, and if we were to shorten that length, then surely the neuronal synapse firing would occur faster, right? And also it's using chemicals and electrical impulses. What if we were to be able to transmit the same amount of information using light? So imagine the smallest possible brain being every neuron you have is replaced with an atom, or an electron or something, or a quark or something. The smallest thing that would be possible of acting as a neuron, and the smallest gap between two neurons is another atom's gap or something like that. And the way they're transmitting information to one another is using light. Obviously light is the fastest thing we currently know of. Then surely that would be infinitely more efficient. Well, not infinitely. That would be more efficient than what we're currently using. And you would be able to fit as many of those, and they'd be as fast as they could be, fit it in the smallest space possible. Then that's more efficient than what we're currently using, and we'd have to aim for that. Anyway, a lot of assumptions I'm making here. What's next? Okay, experiment testing. So on the topic of science, especially in the field that I'm most fondly acquainted with, I don't want to say fondly because I hate it, pharmacology. Something I've noticed so pretty much all experiments get documented in scientific journals. And yeah, that was great. But this is a lot like the topic of religion, in that our reliance on maintaining tradition, or rather our aversion to improving upon tradition, is a limitation. So I think scientific journals were the best way to publish data for when they were first introduced, but I mean, we know we've made technological advancements, and yes, now you can access scientific journals online, but surely we could improve it further. I think the most obvious way would be video documented scientific experiments, where instead of people just writing a methodology section that's undoubtedly going to miss out all kinds of things and also not be an accurate representation of what was done. People could have made mistakes. People would lie just because humans are fallible, and you're trying to make it seem like you conducted it properly, but we could see whether it's being done properly if it was a video log or something, and see it being conducted. So yeah, I think a better way to represent scientific experiments would be videos. It would require you to film it, obviously, but I don't think that would be too hard to maintain for an improvement. Also, I'd quite like to run an experiment on manual versus electric toothbrushes, because I hear that electric toothbrush is better, but since switching back to a manual toothbrush myself, I think my teeth are far cleaner, and I think it may just be a matter of being more active in the process of brushing my teeth. I actually focus on which areas I'm brushing, and I can put a bit more force in than a tiny little electric motor. Just more brushes, more bristles on the brush. I'd like to see it. So, I think this would, obviously I don't really want to do it as a scientific journal, but maybe this could be a scientific experiment video like I've just talked about. Yeah, and basically you do that thing where you get one of those UV light scanner things and see how much food debris is left on teeth after brushing with an electric versus brushing with a regular toothbrush. There you go. Right. I think we're getting towards the end here. Yep. Oh, I've got a little. That's it. That's pretty much all of it. That's pretty much all of it there. So I think I'll end it there, and that will be everything, really. So thanks for listening, Ollie. Because obviously, Ollie, you're the only guy who's gonna ever hear this. But god damn, you're great. You're just the. Have you ever thought about how attractive you are? I wouldn't recommend it because you won't like what you find. So yeah, Ollie, keep up the great work. You're doing a fine, dandy, bang up, sexy banging, fizzle banging, fluckle blopping, phantasmal job. I love you. You're the best, Ollie. Come here. Oh yeah, you're so great.